Just over a mile from the shores of San Francisco stands a small, rocky island surrounded by the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. Its name is Alcatraz. Today, it is one of America's most recognizable historical landmarks. But long before tourists walked through its empty cells, Alcatraz served many different purposes. It was a military fortress, a military prison, a lighthouse site, and eventually one of the most famous federal penitentiaries in American history. The island covers only about 22.5 acres, but its location made it strategically important. Cold water and swift currents surrounded the island, creating a natural barrier between the prison and the mainland. In the 19th century, the United States built fortifications on Alcatraz to defend San Francisco Bay. Heavy guns were installed, soldiers were stationed there, and in 1854, the island became home to the first lighthouse on the Pacific coast. But Alcatraz would eventually become famous for another reason. In 1934, the island was transformed into a maximum security federal penitentiary. Prisoners considered difficult to control in other federal institutions were sent to the Rock. Inside, life was strictly controlled. Prisoners followed a rigid daily routine. They worked, ate in the dining hall, exercised, and returned to their cells. The prison walls were heavily guarded, while the surrounding bay served as a constant reminder of how far freedom really was. Some of America's most notorious criminals spent time behind those walls. Al Capone arrived at Alcatraz in 1934. George "Machine Gun" Kelly, one of America's notorious kidnappers, was also imprisoned there. Alvin Karpis became the longest-serving federal prisoner at Alcatraz, and Robert Stroud, later known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, became one of the prison's most famous inmates. But Alcatraz's reputation was built not only on its prisoners. It was built on the question of whether anyone could escape. There were numerous escape attempts during the prison's history, but one became legendary. On June 11, 1962, prison officials discovered that 3 prisoners were missing: Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. Behind their cells, investigators found holes in the walls. The prisoners had apparently spent months secretly enlarging the openings. They created dummy heads to make their beds appear occupied and constructed a makeshift raft from raincoats. Then, sometime during the night, they disappeared. The next morning, the prison was placed on alert. The raft and other personal belongings were eventually recovered, but the 3 men were never found. The official conclusion was that they most likely drowned in San Francisco Bay, but no bodies were ever recovered. And that unanswered question turned the escape into one of America's most enduring mysteries. Did the men drown in the cold waters, or did they somehow survive? More than 6 decades later, nobody can say with absolute certainty what happened to them. Then, in 1963, Alcatraz closed its doors as a federal penitentiary. The prisoners were transferred, the guards left, and the cell house fell silent. But Alcatraz's history did not end there. In 1969, Native American activists occupied the island in a protest connected to Native American rights, sovereignty, and government policies. The occupation lasted approximately 19 months and transformed Alcatraz into an important symbol of the Native American civil rights movement. Today, the prison no longer holds inmates. The cells remain. The guard towers still overlook the bay, and the walls still stand against the same waters that once made escape seem almost impossible. Alcatraz was built to keep people in, but it is the story of those who tried to get out that continues to keep the world watching.